Another episode of Helping the Brave. I'm your host, Ed Parcaut, the show where we dive into real conversations with veterans who faced the fight, found their footing, and now lead with purpose both in and out of uniform. Today's guest is Francisco Garza, a Marine Corps infantry and reconnaissance officer, a father of 4 young kids, and a tech consultant helping major companies navigate complexity. From leading Marines in high-stake missions to juggling life as a reservist, husband, and corporate leader, Francisco brings a unique blend of discipline, adaptability, and humility to the table. This story isn't about the glory titles. It's about the hard moments in between, the transitions, the questions, the deep values that keep you grounded when everything else is shifting. Whether you're a veteran, a parent, a leader, or just somebody trying to do the right thing in a chaotic world, this conversation's for you. Let's dive in. Francisco Garza, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. What service? This is the only question I ask on every episode. I know already, but what service and why?
So I joined the Marine Corps, and the reason why is in college, my roommate was dead set on being a Marine, and he was an amazing human being. So I followed him right in.
Did you do ROTC or did you just join right after your college?
So I tried to do ROTC, but the contracts at the time were pretty competitive. So I actually ended up in the Marine Corps. They have a different means by which you can commission called platoon leadership course. So I technically joined the reserves for 2 years before commissioning to go to OCS twice, a juniors program and a seniors program. So I was involved with the ROTC, but I ultimately chose a different path, and it ended up benefiting me in the long run.
No, I just didn't know that there's different paths. I'm just trying to explain to people so they understand which way you went. So basically what I'm hearing is while you're in college, you went through OCS a couple times. Is that what I heard?
Correct. Yeah. When you don't go through the ROTC program, you have to go to a juniors, which is 6 weeks. And then shockingly, the highest amount of attrition is actually between juniors and seniors. It's not actually in the course because people don't want to go back to boot camp after taking a year off. So I went back to seniors. I loved OCS so much. I did it twice. And then, commissioned upon graduation, and then ended up in the infantry. And so actually it wasn't even my first choice.
Well, yes, I was going to ask you how, because I know a lot. So my son's in the Army. I was in the Navy. When he was going in, the Army guaranteed what he was going to get, where Air Force would not. So he went with the Army. And he asked me, should I go check the Navy? I'm like, no, as a corpsman, I was the only lucky guy I know that was never on a ship. I was stationed in Camp Pendleton, so I was with you guys, even at the hospital, but I still was there. So you didn't get, so I think going in as an officer in the Marine Corps, I could see regular enlisted not getting what they want, but even officers don't just get what they want.
So they toy with it every now and then, but generally speaking, if you're an officer in the Marine Corps, you go to officer candidate school, then you commission, and then you go to the basic officers course at the basic school, which is in Quantico, so they're next door. And when I was going through, they had a 3-tier system. So they would break your class up into thirds: top third, middle third, bottom third. And then to ensure quality control across all MOSs, they would allow the first person in the first third his first choice, because it's stack choice ranking. And then the first person in the second third would get his first choice, and the first person in the bottom third would get his first choice. And that would institute quality control across the system. So I was actually bottom of the top third, and I put artillery down as my top choice. At the time, I was big into history. I still am, but I was reading a lot of Napoleon, and I thought, well, if Napoleon was an artillery officer, that's good enough for me. But being at the bottom of the first third, I didn't get my first choice. And I ended up in the infantry, which ended up being a huge blessing because it opened up a lot more doors for me. For example, I went to Hawaii off the bat to be in the infantry out there, but I actually ended up in Camp Pendleton with 1st Recon. So Recon's not open to, well, it's only open to people who've graduated the infantry officers course. So being able to go to that next level within the Marine Corps was only open to me because I was in the infantry. And that opened the doors for jump school, dive school, and all sorts of really cool and interesting training opportunities, and a third deployment while I was on active duty.
How long were you in?
I was on active duty for just over 7.5 years. And one of the things that, with Helping the Brave podcast, like being on here, there's two things I was hoping to talk about. And it's one, philosophy, and two, the reserves. So the transition out of the active duty, I've always I guess I suffer from hubris, but if you talk to Marines, it's probably very common in infantry officers. But I assumed that, like upon leaving the active duty, I was an infantry officer. I had commanded platoons. I was a company XO. I had gone to all these special schools. I was accepted into an MBA program right off the bat. I thought I was good to go. But ultimately, I didn't have a direction. I just knew that those were the steps that successful people had done. So I lacked a philosophical principle of what I was shooting for. So I had all the credentials. I had the pathway down, but I didn't know what I was looking for at the end of that path. So the saving grace about being unprincipled in that approach was that I was in the reserves. And I'll talk on that first. So when I left active duty, the only thing that I wanted to do that the Marine Corps had left to offer me that I was interested in was being a company commander. So when I transitioned out, I did what's a direct affiliation package right off the bat. And I had a buddy that did that, and he's a great mentor and a great American for sure. But he called me and he's like, "Hey, I know you're getting out." He talked to me about what my plans were. He said, "All this sounds great, but I would encourage you to join the reserves." I asked him why, and he's like, "Hey, like from a mental health standpoint, like it's good to be amongst Marines every now and then." And I'm not saying this from a clinical background. I'm saying this from an emotional standpoint. Like I feel at home amongst Marines.
I understand. It's what you're used to. It's what you're used to being around. Yeah.
For seven straight years. Yeah.
Brotherhood or sisterhood, depending on where you are in that rank. But yeah, I was in 5 years, 5 months and 14 days, but who was counting? And then I was an active reserve. I said I was not going to go in the reserves. And the reason I was going to go in the reserves is because you could get pulled up to go to active duty. And everybody at the time was like, "No, you'll never get called up." Well, no, I knew what they were doing with the forces and everything else. And I've interviewed so many people who were in reserves or in National Guard who was deployed more than the active duty people were deployed. And so just be careful when you go in the reserves that you are going to be pulled up for potential active duty. And you just have to understand that. But I understand what you mean by being around who you're used to. You've been around those people for so long. That's all you know. And when you get that's taken away from you, one, you've lost your purpose and you lost your people. And so I totally understand that.
Absolutely. And some of my best friends on the civilian side are actually reservists because it's a great place to network and meet people with that like-minded experience that may be outside of your social circle or outside of your geographic location. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say, like everything you said about there is a distinct possibility of deployment and being called up to active duty, but also the healthcare. It is something that I found has kind of been a superpower that the reserve has empowered me with. Is I don't get my health insurance from my company. I get it from my service in the reserves. And I'll get more on that later. But with the reserve side,
you're already there.
Joined the reserves.
Explain the healthcare so we don't have to come back to it because we'll forget.
All right. Thank you for the call out. So healthcare, I could have as many kids as I want because I also got married upon transitioning out of the Marine Corps and we were looking to have a family. You can have literally as many kids as you want and your healthcare doesn't go up. And dollar for dollar, it's still the government. So, you always have to deal with that. But dollar for dollar, it's one of the best healthcare plans out there. And as long as you're in a good standing as a reservist, it's yours. And I'm not going to throw numbers out because I'll probably get it wrong, but it's significantly cheaper than what you'd be paying out of pocket with almost any corporate plan. And the fact that it comes from the reserve side, that gives you a very unique bargaining chip when you are going through the hiring process and when you're going for selection for, hey, if I have multiple offers, what is it that I want? Because so many of my friends who are not reservists are dealing with very very tangible problems when it comes to, I hate my job and I want to leave, but I can't sacrifice coverage. Or between these two companies, this is the one I want to work for, but this one has the better package for my family's needs. And those types of decisions I don't have to deal with. And you can take that into an interview. You can leverage that. And it really empowered me to say no to opportunities, because it's like, hey, like I can be just a reservist and continue working at a lower level job before I jump in, because I don't need health insurance. I don't have to worry about that. And that has allowed me to really select which private companies I work for. And that type of freedom has something that I don't see on the civilian side with my non-reservist counterparts.
Gotcha. And the only caveat to that is if you get out and you have disability and because only 100% covers the spouses and the kids. And, so we'll move on from there. All right. So that's a great idea. Now go back to your other thing. You were going to go down that other rabbit hole for a minute.
Oh yeah. So doing my MBA, there was actually one other Marine in my class, fantastic guy, good friends with him, but I graduated during COVID. So the job market was just wildly in flux. People were losing jobs. People were worried about the scope of their jobs. So I was employed by the Marine Corps Reserve. So I had some income when I got off my GI Bill, and I had health insurance. So I was not in a hard spot. But I was looking at my civilian job at the time, which I was contracting for NASA, which is really cool, but it was an entry-level job. So now that I had this MBA, I was like, where can I go? Because now I'm just sitting at this entry-level job and I have nowhere to go. And then lo and behold, the reserves provided an opportunity where it's like, hey, we're looking for somebody to go 1 year on active duty in DC to assist with, this total government approach to the pandemic. So my wife has family in DC, as well as California, just the coast. She's the oddball out for coming to Texas, but we got to travel to DC for a year before we had kids. We hung out with her family on the East Coast. I was able to hold a job title and get some practical experience that were beneficial for both civilian and military experience. And then transitioning out of that year, I get 2 phone calls in quick succession. So I got a phone call from that Marine that I met in my MBA cohort. He was like, hey, there is a civilian company, Credera, they're consultants. They're hiring managers, and I think you'd be a great fit. And I was like, absolutely, throw my name in the hat. Let's go. And then I got a second phone call from my reserve unit asking me to be a company commander. So all this is happening in very quick succession after the pandemic. I had been married for a while now, but I just had my first kid. I was now going to be a company commander. I was transitioning to like corporate leadership. And what I've discovered is that approach where I'm just going to be as aggressive as possible, and I'm just going to do the next thing that I think I should do as aggressively as possible, was not going to work for me in this situation across the board. So, like being in the military mindset, right? Like every 3 years is going to be a new job. So you're just aggressively like going at it as hard as you can, knowing that in 3 years you're going to transition up and out and go to the next thing. So that's where I took a philosophical approach to life. It's at that moment where company command is different. Like I'm not a platoon commander. I'm not going to know the name of everybody, that I'm leading. It's going to be a systems approach where it's like, I have to understand the system of what that company is. I'm going to become a manager in a consulting firm, and I'm going to have to go and, lead teams in a civilian sector for a buyer. And there's a lot of competition out there for, in the consulting word for who you're going to select. So you have to be competitive. You have to be competent. You have to be personable, like all these things. You have to lead teams in that manner. And then I was going to be a dad, which quite frankly, that was the hardest part. Because I don't know how everyone else is, but I was purely in the camp of it worked good. It worked good for me. So I'm just going to do what my dad did. My wife had different thoughts. So we had to have these really in-depth conversations about how we were going to parent these kids. And then I had to have in-depth conversations with, my senior enlisted advisor and my battalion commander, like, how am I going to lead this company? I had to have talks with partners and stakeholders from corporate entities. Like, how am I going to lead this team to be effective? And that's where philosophy took really hold on my approach to life. So what that comes down to is laying out kind of foundationally, not specifics, but like foundationally, I wrote down what it is that I believed, which is surprisingly hard. That is actually was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever written, because when you don't write your philosophy down, it's very easy for you to play mental gymnastics for like, oh, I could justify my actions through my perceived lens of what my philosophy is because I've never had to test it. It's never actually been held to the fire. So after you write that down, it becomes really apparent that like, okay, the thing that I want to give people most, whether that be my Marines in the reserves, whether that's clients, or whether that's my kids, it's like, I want to be as consistent as possible. And that just really trickles down into like, all right, what does that mean? Like, how am I going to be like exemplify virtues? And there's 4 virtues that like have really jumped out at me a lot over the time. And it's wisdom, temperance, justice, courage. And temperance is kind of the mother of all those. Like, how do I stay even keeled? How do I provide consistency for buyers, for my family, for those Marines? Because consistency breeds an environment that allows people to thrive because they're not guessing what the outcome is going to be from you. That's the core of the message, right? Like, if you're going to transition out, give the reserves a shot, and then write down your philosophy, because I can go down rabbit holes of where being unprincipled, and I don't mean to be self-deprecating, but just not having a principled approach has led to slowdowns or to failures.
So you're thinking that all the success you've had, I mean, it's obvious, but it has come from the reserves. I mean,
reserves have been a supporting effort number one.
Yeah,
I'll say that.
Well, I mean that you went to DC for a year from the reserves, which gave you probably more information and more to go to the next level that you're going to go to. From that, you became the company commander, right? If I'm following you. And then from that, because of that, people know who you are, that people you met, and they're like, well, he was doing this, and now you're at a totally different level. What I see from transitioning most people getting out is they don't know what they're going to do. They don't have a plan. Or if they have a plan, that plan didn't last very long. But I also see that sometimes, and please don't take this wrong, it's easier for officers than it is enlisted. But let me just caveat that with long-term officers, people have been in longer, 15, 20 years. People have been in for 7 years. I don't care if you're enlisted or officer, you do not have the same amount of support that you normally would have. So I understand why you're saying going in the reserves would help you. And I get that.
I agree with your assessment, because when I came out of active duty, I was in the MBA program. I was ready to rock and roll. I was like, make my millions. I was in the MBA program. My LinkedIn was impeccable, but every business idea I had, I tried to start up a business. It didn't work. It was brash. It was forward. It was fast. The market research wasn't done properly. Mistaking speed and intensity for success was a fault of mine, and I see that pretty consistently. So, and when I come back to this, like writing down your philosophy, appropriately structuring your priorities when you exit active duty, and why I don't want to say that the reserves were the reason I was successful is because I'm a big believer in personal responsibility for failure and success, right? So the reserves enabled me to make some mistakes. They enabled me to execute opportunities. But ultimately, like, especially once you're married, like, it's a conversation between you and your wife, like, what's best for the family? And the reserves have provided opportunities and have provided a shield from having to make some of those hard decisions. And now, as I very distinctly remember when I first started my MBA program, there was a gentleman that came and spoke to the class, and he talked about how he was so scared that his business was going to grow too fast. And the only thing that I could think of was what it was. Um, and it was now that I've actually gone through the MBA, I've been in the corporate sector for a while, and like I've had business ideas kind of come so close to like crossing the threshold and then failing. I get it, because it's so hard to come up with a sustainable business model that's not going to be a flash in the pan. And like that is driven by the fact that I wrote down my philosophy, and like now like I do have a business strategy for my own business, but that's going to be something that's 5 years in the making. And it's because I've recognized through past failures, writing down what it is that I want and how am I going to achieve it in a principled approach, that it's like, okay, like success, like if you want sustained success over a long enough time horizon where it's meaningful, like that's going to take time to build, and it has to be in a somewhat natural way. It's really hard to take shortcuts for like that long-term success, especially while you're out there like supporting your family or potentially like on the fence about whether or not you want to break it out on your own.
For a lot of people are going to go, philosophy, what the heck is this guy talking about? Because I mean, not everybody is going to connect with knowing, understanding, but to break it easily down for most people, it's who am I out of the uniform? What is my purpose now? What does leadership look outside of the military? What is that? It's all those. Who are you? Is what you're basically trying to tell people figure out. And please, I always try to break it down to the easiest words. I was a redneck. I grew up dirt road poor. So I always try to break it down to where everybody can understand. That's why I don't like people I tell everybody, do no acronyms. Don't care, because not everybody who is in the same platoon or whatever is going to understand what you're talking about. Even because other people watch the show that are non-military just to understand what's going on. And so I'm just trying to break it down for people to understand that what you're saying is, who are you? Who are you? What are you trying to do with your life? And am I getting that pretty much right?
Close? Right on the money.
All right. So, because for me, so I got my bachelor's and master's. Well, I finished my master's as soon as I got out. And everybody was wanting me to go. They want to know why I wasn't staying in the military to be an officer. And the first one in the Navy, that means ships. That means you're always on a ship. There's no, and I was a corpsman. I got lucky. I didn't get to see a ship. I visited a couple of friends of mine on one, but I didn't actually. So for me, if I maybe would have been in the Army, I might have transitioned to officer, but that would have meant I had to be in an Army to begin with, but I was a grown up. So, and I make fun of that because I listen to my son all the time, having to go into formation all the time. I'm sure you guys in the Marines had to do the same thing, but we in the Navy, we got together twice a year if we were lucky for command stuff.
I have a question for you. Does the term, I've heard the term institutionalized for people who have stayed too long in the military or have committed too much of their time in the reserves to the military, as like saying that for a corporate recruiter, like, hey, like this person, he's too institutionalized into the military where like his transition is just going to be too hard. Have you ever heard anything like that?
No, but I mean, I used it one time when I was dating my wife. The first time I said I was in, and I said that word, and she thought I meant I was in prison. But because I said incarceration. I said I've been incarcerated before because it is a form of incarceration. You sign on the line to give them that so long you can't just quit. I think what the problem has been in the past, and it's not really that, it's people don't understand military people. And what I've learned is instead of trying to change them, just go get around other people who understand who you are. What I mean by that is companies. There's companies out there who will pick us up like nobody's business because they know what we come. We have attention to detail. We know SOPs. We know how to do stuff that nobody else understands how to do stuff. And that's okay. You just have to find the right community. It's like myself. When I first got out, all I did was VA loans and stuff like that because I was in the mortgage industry. And then I grew a huge company. I did everything. And now I've gotten back because I do Helping the Brave podcast for the last 4 years. I also created a veterans benefit company from it because I went and got my benefits, and what a nightmare it was. I wanted it easier for other people to get their benefits and make it so much easier and faster. And so now I only focus on veterans, and that's even in my other business. I push people away to get the right people. My message is only to that person. And I don't know if that's an answer to what you were saying, but so
No,
I think it's just a matter of who is your people? Who do you want to work with? Who do you want to be around? And that's who you need to focus on. And then if you were talking about businesses, how all your things didn't work out, the biggest problem for most people is they don't know who their perfect client is. If you don't know who your perfect client is, you're going to fail because you're not to everybody, and everybody wants everybody because they're afraid to make that decision. Even myself, when I retooled over the last few years, I separated my companies into 3 different companies: veterans, reverse mortgages, and business owners, because that's who I dealt with. Well, in order to get the right message to each one of those, they need to come to the right place. And I can't do that with one company that has 3 different pages for 3 different people. The whole site needs to talk to them. So back to your statement, I don't know if you're institutionalized, because I deal with a lot of retirees. I deal with a lot of people who, and when I mean retirees, 20 years, that's not a long time. But you put in that, and they're fine. It's just, I just think you have to go to the right place, the right company, the right place,
I got 3 things to caveat with what you're saying. So one, it's funny that you say incarcerated. That's how I describe my deployment with the Navy.
Well, you were in the Marine Corps, but that is part of the Navy. You are part of the Navy because your checks came from the Department of the Navy. So,
yes, they do. And I had to pay my pound of flesh back to the Department of the Navy on that boat. Second, what you mentioned about like knowing your customer, like the customer journey, it's just because you have a great product, like,
yeah,
that's not the whole story. The customer journey piece is so huge. And then the third thing, like you talked about knowing your customer, knowing the perfect customer, knowing businesses that can see you and see your skills, and transferring your skills. Like I'm just going to keep like beating this dead horse. The reserves is a great place to network and find companies that recognize veterans and recognize them well. And it's also a great place to refine how it is do I talk about my military experience and convey that in a corporate environment. So I've had the absolute luxury of working with phenomenal staff NCOs and officers. And actually, to your point, I've never thought of this, but I think you're right. I think that officers tend to have more long-term support when it comes to corporate transitions. And I don't know why that would be, but I definitely get I get anecdotally that what you're saying is right. But even with that, staff NCOs and officers in all these units that I've been with, listening to them talk about like, hey, this industry is great. Here are the pros, here are the cons. And then like your military experience X is really translatable to this career path if you phrase it like this, because those different career paths have different terminology that mean different things. Like you were saying, no acronyms. Every industry has its own set of acronyms, and it's learning a new language and being able to interface with people that have already done it, and being able to talk to people that are 5-10 years ahead of me in the Marine Corps, in the corporate world, and picking their brains, being like, hey, like, yeah, it's like, don't say this. Like, no one knows what you're talking about. Phrase it like that. Just simple stuff like that. Just having those conversations has just been really meaningful.
Right. But it's very difficult for people to find that. And I do a firewalk for veterans. I've done it every year for the last 2 years. And it's to figure out your purpose, what your plan is. We have a motivational speaker. And in the night, you actually do a Tony Robbins type of firewalk, because the guy that helps me put it on actually worked for Tony Robbins for 20 years. So I can say that. But from that, one of the things I found out was, and it felt the same way. Most of us, I interviewed a guy and he was talking about, you get out of the military, you can take a Bradley, paint it a school bus, and paint it like a school bus, sell it's a school bus. It'll still rip up the streets because it doesn't know it's a school bus. We're a tool of war when we get out, and we need to make those changes. And so he was talking about we need a boot camp out. Well, we totally do. And from my last event, I actually created CivOps Academy, which is not fully running yet. It's just the idea. I put it together, put it on a web. It's ready to go. I just now got to build out the rest of it. But besides my mortgage company, 4 different podcast radio shows, everything else I'm doing, again, there's something to be said with focus on what you're trying to do and just focus on that one thing, and that you'll do really well. It's really difficult to build out 5 different things at the same time. You need to build one, get it going, and then build the rest of it. And that's what's happening with me. So the reason I built it out and I talk about it is because I think it's very important. There's so many avenues I can see that it's coming together to get people to be part of that. There's a company here in the Bay Area will give all their courses for veterans for free through that program. And it's called Learn It. Ever heard of Learn It of the Bay? They do all the computer training. They've been for 30 years doing computer training online. And so you can learn anything and everything. And they're like, we'll give it to you, Ed. You can have it as part of your program. So because there's something to help vets that we need to keep helping vets as we get out, because the transition out is so much difficult for the average veteran. And it's not necessarily you have a plan. And then it's like, what's his name? The guy that got his ear bit off. Mike Tyson says, you have a plan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, until you get punched in the face. And that's the same thing with getting out. You have a plan, then something happens, and things change. And it's being able to come together and be connected with people that you've known, and being part of the reserves. I can see that, but also stay connected to the people you were in the military with. I am not connected with, probably there's 2 people I could reach out to right now that were connected to me to the military. And that's just because things are different now. Things are so much easier to stay connected than there were in the past.
2 things. One, listening to your podcast, the firewalking, when I first heard it, I thought it was like an analogy or something. But then, like, as you kept mentioning it through, like, in episodes past, like, I finally figured out, like, oh no, he's talking about actual firewalking.
Yeah. Yeah, if you go to operationfirewalk.com, you can see we're still redoing today the new website currently, but it has the video on there from 2 years ago, the first time we put it on, and it shows the actual walking across the coals.
That's awesome. Not for me, but
no, for a lot of my wife's like, I don't need to do it, whatever. And it's not. We had some people burn their feet this last year because they thought, you know what, it's no big deal. I'll just walk slower. No, it's a freaking fire. You need to be focused and be on otherwise you're going to get, and when I mean burn, if you get a couple blisters, but you have to be focused. You have to, and that's just helping you reconnect the understanding that things that can, that are stopping you, you can put them aside, and they're limiting beliefs that are stopping you. You can get through them. And that's what that's for. What?
Power to you.
Yeah, but, I've done it for 4 times now, each year twice. So, yeah.
I enjoy jogging too much. I couldn't risk it. But I'm sorry, I'm derailing this conversation. But
we're fine.
But to your point, all good. To your point about the failure to transition. All right, so the staying connected, mentorship, I'm actually overwhelmed at how much people want to help veterans. And I feel like there's so many options and so many people out there who want to help veterans that, because I'm overwhelmed, I actually am not pursuing all of the options that is available to me. And this is a conversation that I've had with multiple veterans where it's like, there's so many organizations competing for the airwaves for our attention, and they're all, I'm presuming, right? Like they're all in good faith. And another thing that goes back to philosophy and to the reserves. So, what type of business am I going to run, or what type of business leader am I going to be? Talk about all right, I'm looking for things that recognize the dignity of work, recognize the dignity of the human being. I'm not in it for the money, but I want to be compensated appropriately, and defining that. And then you go back to the reserves, and you can start listening, and because it's really about listening. And when you're at your reserve duty station, I feel it's about listening, and it's about asking the right questions, because there's so many wonderful organizations out there, and some of them are incredibly niche. Some of them are pretty broad, but if you know what the type of organization you need that can help you achieve what you're doing, if you know who you want to be, you can start connecting the dots to those organizations that want to help you. Because sometimes, you go to a veteran networking event and you find out oh, this is not for me. This is really geared towards the transportation industry. Why is everyone here really into motor transport platoons? Oh, I'm in the wrong place. And some of that may not be stated. Some of that may just be the demographics of the veterans in your area, where like, hey, if you go to like the Veterans of Foreign Wars or the American Legion, like it's a huge Air Force crowd. Like, oh, and I'm a Marine, and like they're all talking about like working on a flight line, and like, oh, it's not for me. So like you need to connect yourself into you need to ask the right questions when you're connecting into the veteran network to get it in touch with the organizations that can tailor their assistance to you. And if you don't know what you're looking for, if you don't know what type of civilian you want to be, it's going to be hard to ask the right questions. And there's a window of opportunity. If you do not go to the reserve route, I feel like there's a window of opportunity, and it's about 3 years long. Because I meet veterans who have been out for over 3 years, and this is a anecdotal line that I'm drawing in the sand. But at about the 3 year mark, you just give up on the veteran support networks, and you start just doing it. Going through other traditional methods like friends, family, alma maters, and it's really sad because you run into these people, and it's like, yeah, like all these people tried to help, and none of them could. And it's like, I bet that there's an organization that could have helped you. We just weren't able to make the connection. And some of that is always on personal responsibility. Like you didn't have a clearly defined path of where you wanted to go. You didn't know what industry you wanted to do. You didn't understand like downfalls of certain career paths, or like you misaligned your priorities. So always back to personal responsibility. But it's sad to see those missed opportunities.
And a lot of people just don't ask for help. That's the one thing we don't do well, is ask for help. So, and then you got to get over. And I always say, well,
Yep.
if you're under fire, you would call for air support. So, no problem.
Yeah, right? You may ask for the F-18 or the F-22, but in a pinch, hey, that one helicopter with the 240 sure looks nice.
Whatever, you were still asked for it, whatever it is, and that's the big difference. But you're right. It's a lot of us just will stop asking for help, and then when we really need it, and that's why I'm real big on us reaching out to. We hear the numbers for veteran suicide. It's it's the numbers that people use as 22 a day or whatever. And when I first was doing the stuff I was doing the year of my veteran at my Rotary, that's what I used. But by the time I was done my year, I knew it was more like 50 a day. But what I'm getting at is my big thing is my challenge 22 is to reach out to 22 different people a week to just see how they're doing and making sure that they're okay. And they all don't have to be veterans. They could just be anybody, family, friends, anybody. Just check out the people, because people need that support, especially today. So, Francisco, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you today? There was one more thing I wanted to add before you finish. There's 43,000 nonprofits to help veterans. That's one of the problems. There's too many of them.
I agree. And again, like, write down who you want to be, stay involved, keep asking. One of those organizations should be able to help you very narrowly achieve what it is that you want to achieve.
And if there's only one thing, and hold on, if you can't figure that out, you can always reach out to me. Info at Helping the Brave. Reach out to me and I can help you. So get to where you need to go.
Yeah. Keep reaching out.
Yeah.
There's only one thing left I'd like to talk about, and that is there is a nonprofit called the Reconnaissance Foundation. So I am a recon Marine. I went to the basic reconnaissance course. I was a recon platoon commander. I did my incarceration aboard the USS America. All good stuff. But within our community, there is one foundation, the Recon Foundation, and they do a lot of work. It's not exclusive to, but it includes a Gold Star family retreat. So for those who are unaware, a Gold Star family is a military family, whether that's a spouse or a parent, or in some cases siblings, that they have a service member who has died in the line of duty. So the Recon Foundation, they host a Gold Star family retreat. And if there's going to be one thing that I'm going to support full-heartedly, it's looking out for those families who have lost a loved one. And I think that bringing those families together and conducting that retreat to be amongst families who are in similar situations and be hosted by people who have experience very similar things to their service member, I feel like that's very cathartic, and I'll plug them wherever I can. And that's the last thing I needed to say.
All right, Francisco, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your story with everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
All right, thank you. Wow, what a conversation, Francisco Garza. He reminds us that leadership isn't about titles or uniform. It's about showing up with integrity, owning your decisions, and serving others, whether you're on a battlefield, in a boardroom, or at home with 4 kids under 4. His story bridges worlds, military and civilian, faith and doubt, structure and chaos. And in that tension, he's found a deeper definition of resilience, one that says you don't have to have it all the answers. Let me try that again. You don't have to have all the answers. I wish I could always do that on time, but that's how outros are. You just keep going. You just have to keep the leading with purpose. If Francisco's journey resonated with you, be sure to check out the incredible work being done through the Marine Reconnaissance Foundation. You can support their mission by visiting RECONFOUNDATION.org and donate. As always, thank you for listening to Helping the Brave. If today's episode made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, leave a review, and most importantly, keep showing up for each other. And until next time, keep helping the brave.